They say you can feel it in the room, the moment hope dies. For me, it happened on a Tuesday, at 2:47 in the morning, under the harsh buzz of fluorescent lights in the ICU. I was holding Lily's hand, her skin like paper over bone. Machines beeped softly around us, counting what little time we had left. A nurse passed behind me without a word, like I wasn't even there. I guess I wasn't, not really. Most days, I felt like a ghost. But that night, I was something worse. Alive and powerless. The doctor had told me earlier that evening, in his carefully practiced voice, that the aneurysm in Lily's brain was growing. Fast. He used the phrase aggressive and inoperable. Said the pressure was building. Said it was a matter of days. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared past him at the wall and thought, no. This can't be it. Lily was only 23. She liked pink hair dye, bad horror movies, and putting glitter on everything, even the dog. She was the only person who ever told me I needed to laugh more. And now she was going to die in this cold, humming box while I sat and watched. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't. So that night, while Lily slept under morphine and machines, I left the hospital and drove home with my hands shaking on the wheel. The city lights blurred past my windows, but I barely noticed. I already knew what I was going to do. I had spent the last 2 weeks digging into things no sane person would believe in. The kind of books you find in corners of the internet without URLs. Pages filled with sigils, whispers, warnings. One name kept coming up over and over, buried deep beneath all the noise. Pepe. Stupid name, right? Harmless. Almost funny. But every mention came with a warning. Don't speak it aloud. Don't search too deep. Don't ever call him unless you're willing to pay everything. Well, I had nothing left to lose. Except my soul. Back at my apartment, I opened the drawer under my bed and pulled out the folder I had kept hidden like some dirty secret. Inside were notes, torn pages, and a list of items written in red ink. I lit the black candle, drew the circle in salt and ash on my living room floor, spoke the name 3 times. My voice barely trembled, and then the lights went out. The candle didn't flicker, it turned blue. Cold crept in, not like winter chill, but the kind that crawls up your spine and settles in your bones. The shadows on the walls twisted, stretching longer than they should. And then he stepped out of the dark like it had opened just for him. He looked normal. Human. A dark suit, black gloves, eyes too calm. But the air around him pressed down on my chest like a fist. You called, he said, voice like silk dipped in oil. And you're not screaming. Impressive. I need to make a deal, I said, my throat dry. He smiled. Perfect teeth. The kind that make you think of fangs without showing any. Of course you do. They always do. I didn't ask what he meant. I just pulled out the photo of Lily, us at the lake 2 summers ago, her hair bright pink, laughing alive. She's dying. Fix it. He took the photo, studied it, then looked at me with eyes that didn't reflect light. And what are you offering in return? My soul, I whispered. He chuckled. A real, deep laugh that echoed too long in the room. You're offering it like it's a gift. Like I'm lucky to have it. It's all I have. He stepped closer. I didn't move. I couldn't. His presence was like gravity. Done, he said. But nothing is free, Joan Maddox. Your sister will live. For 6 months. After that, I collect. He reached out, not to shake my hand, but to touch my chest with one gloved finger. I felt a burning beneath my skin, like ink sinking into bone. And then he was gone. No flash. No sound. Just gone. The lights came back on. The candle snuffed itself out. And I stood there in the quiet, the salt circle broken at my feet, knowing I had just changed everything. The next morning, Lily woke up. Smiling. Laughing. Alive. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I still remember the way the wind changed that night. The old church in Vermont stood like a skeleton in the woods, half swallowed by vines and darkness. The roof had collapsed years ago, and only one wall was still upright. But the altar was still there. Cracked, stained, and waiting. I parked my car at the edge of a narrow dirt path and killed the headlights. The forest around me was dead quiet. No birds. No bugs. Just the sound of my heartbeat drumming in my ears and the crunch of dead leaves beneath my boots. I had the book in my bag. The one I wasn't supposed to have. It wasn't bound in leather. It wasn't covered in blood. It was a plain, dusty thing I found in the basement archives of the Boston Library, tucked behind a false panel in the occult section, as if someone wanted to hide it, but not too well. No title on the cover. Just pages of strange symbols, and even stranger instructions. Page 117. That's where I found the ritual. A way to call Pepe. The text called him the collector of promises, the broker of lost time, a demon who doesn't trade in pain, but in hope. That's what made it worse. He didn't force you to beg. He waited for you to come to him. I reached the altar and spread out the tools: 3 black candles, salt, a mirror, and a small silver dagger. The moon slipped behind a cloud as I knelt and traced a circle of salt around me. The air was suddenly colder. I could see my breath even though it was spring. The book said to cut your palm. Offer your own blood. So I did. The blade was sharp. My hand trembled as the warm liquid dripped onto the stone. I whispered the words as best I could. They weren't in any language I recognized, but they came out of my mouth like I'd known them forever. For a moment, nothing happened. Just silence. Then the wind rushed in, hard and sudden, as if the trees all exhaled at once. The candles flared. The mirror cracked. My ears rang with something like laughter, but not the kind you ever want to hear. And then he was there, standing just outside the circle. Pepe. He didn't crawl out of the shadows or rise from the ground. He stepped in, like he'd been there all along. A tall man in a dark green suit. No tie. Shoes too clean for the mud. Skin pale as bone. Hair slicked back. And those eyes like polished obsidian, but too deep. Too knowing. Joan, he said, as if we were old friends. You called. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. You want to save your sister, he continued. Lily. 17 years old. Cerebral arteriovenous malformation pressing against her brainstem. 2 weeks left. Maybe less. A tragic case. But not hopeless, with me. He smiled. That smile didn't reach his eyes. What do you want? I whispered. Pepe tilted his head. Such a mortal question. I want what's already promised. Your soul. When your body dies, I collect. No pain. No fire. Just silence. And in return, your sister wakes up tomorrow. Whole. Healthy. No catches. Just a contract. He pulled a thin, black book from his coat pocket and handed it to me. It had my name on the cover. I opened it. Every page was filled with words I didn't understand. But one line was written in red, clear and simple. Lily Maddox lives. Joan Maddox serves. I held the pen in my shaking hand. I'll find a way out of this, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Pepe just smiled wider. Everyone tries. I signed. As soon as the pen left the page, the candles blew out. The wind stopped. The silence was louder than a scream. And Pepe was gone. Only the book remained, sitting quietly on the cracked altar. That night, I drove home in silence. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. When I reached the hospital and stepped into Lily's room, I nearly dropped to the floor. She was sitting up, smiling, eating pudding like nothing ever happened. Joan, she said, did you do something to your hair? I couldn't speak. All I could do was nod and hold her hand, while the mark on my chest began to burn. I thought the deal would buy me peace. Lily woke up the next morning like nothing had happened. The aneurysm was gone. No pain. No memory of the night before. Just her sleepy smile and a raspy, Joan, when I walked into her hospital room. I broke down crying right there beside her bed. The doctors called it a medical miracle. I knew better. Pepe had delivered exactly what he promised. But peace? That part never came. I returned to Boston 2 days later, telling myself I had time. 6 months. I just had to find a way to break the deal. There had to be a loophole, a backdoor, something Pepe didn't expect. I'd read stories about demons, about clever mortals outwitting them. I could be one of them, right? The first night back in my apartment, everything felt off. I unlocked the door and stepped into silence. The kind of silence that feels thick, like it's pressing against your ears. My apartment smelled strange, like old candles and rain-soaked books. The curtains were drawn, though I didn't remember closing them. The clock on the wall had stopped at 3:33. I laughed nervously and tapped the glass face of the clock. The hands didn't move. I tried my bedroom lamp, no light. But when I went to the kitchen and flipped that switch, it blinked on just fine. Only my bedroom was dark. I told myself it was nothing. A bad circuit. Maybe I was just tired. But the air felt heavier in there, like the walls were leaning in just a little. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard something shifting in the hallway. Light footsteps. Breathing. Once, I heard a faint whisper right next to my ear. Time's ticking, Joan. I shot up from bed, my heart hammering so hard I could barely breathe. No one was there. I turned on every light in the apartment and stayed up until sunrise. The next morning, I went to work like everything was normal. Typed out motions for a fraud case. Smiled when my boss asked how my sister was doing. Pretended I wasn't unraveling. But when I glanced into the bathroom mirror at the courthouse, I froze. My reflection was smiling. I wasn't. It held the grin just long enough for me to doubt myself, then matched my expression like nothing had happened. I stood there, staring at myself, trying to breathe. My hands were trembling. I told myself it was stress. Just stress. A side effect of guilt and too little sleep. But deep down I knew. The pact was real, and something had followed me home. That night, I poured salt across my doorway and window sills. I lit candles, cheap ones from the corner store, and whispered words from the old book I used for the ritual. I didn't know what they meant, but the syllables tasted bitter in my mouth. I sat on the couch, surrounded by flickering light, and waited. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the lights died again. The candles went out all at once. My phone screen lit up by itself. No calls, no texts, just the lock screen, and the background photo of me and Lily from her birthday party last year. But her eyes were black. I dropped the phone and it clattered to the floor. Then I heard the knock. Just once. A single, heavy knock on the front door. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The door didn't open, but something slid underneath. A folded piece of old parchment. Yellowed, like it had been buried for years. I crept forward, picked it up with shaking hands, and unfolded it. 3 words, written in black ink. Remember the price. No signature. But I didn't need one. Pepe hadn't forgotten our deal. And now, he was making sure I wouldn't either. I stayed up the rest of the night, with every light on. And in the silence, I swear I heard him laughing. I should have known he wouldn't stay gone for long. It was raining hard that night, the kind of rain that sounds like 1,000 whispers tapping against the windows. The city was quiet in the way that makes your skin itch, like something was holding its breath. I was curled up on the couch, clutching a mug of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. My laptop sat open, but I wasn't reading anymore. I couldn't. My eyes kept drifting to the clock. 3:33 a.m. Again. Every night for the past week, I woke up or looked at the clock at exactly that time. It didn't matter if I fell asleep at 10 or if I stayed up till 2. The moment I blinked, it was 3:33. Always. The first time, I thought it was coincidence. The second, I brushed it off. The third? I started checking every light switch in the apartment and keeping salt by the front door like the forum suggested. Then came the whisper. It started in the vents, soft at first, like wind. Then a rasp, barely a breath, Joan. I'd freeze every time I heard it. But when I leaned in, there was nothing. Just the hum of the old building and the slow tick of the clock on the wall. But tonight wasn't whispers or shadows. Tonight, he returned. He didn't knock. He didn't slither through the wall or burst from a mirror like some horror movie demon. He just walked into my living room like he'd never left. He looked exactly the same. Tailored black suit, crisp white shirt, not a wrinkle in sight. Dark eyes that held no bottom, no end. And that smile, wide and amused, like he was watching a child play with knives. "Miss Maddox," he said, his voice as smooth as butter melting on fire. "You look tense." I stood up fast, knocking the mug off the table. It shattered on the floor, coffee splashing across my bare feet, but I didn't even flinch. "You said 6 months," I hissed. "It's only been 3. He tilted his head. "Time is relative, wouldn't you agree? Besides, I thought I'd check in. See how our little arrangement is maturing." I wanted to scream at him. Throw something. Run. But I knew it wouldn't matter. You don't run from things like him. You deal. "Get out," I said. "You're not welcome here." He chuckled and strolled toward my bookshelf, trailing his fingers along the dusty spines like he was shopping for a good story. "Oh, Joan, you invited me the moment you bled for me." He pulled out one of the old occult books I'd hidden behind a law textbook. His fingers tapped the cover lightly. "Still trying to wriggle out of the deal, I see." I said nothing. "I admire your determination," he continued. "Most people just scream. Or beg. You're looking for loopholes. Reading dusty Latin. Searching for forgotten prayers." He turned toward me again, eyes narrowing. "You don't understand what you've signed." My voice cracked as I said it. "I gave you my soul. I didn't know what else to do. She was dying. You." "I kept my word," he interrupted, stepping closer. "Lily is alive. Happy. Playing music again, I believe. She's quite talented." He was too close now. I could smell something strange on him. like burnt wood and roses that had rotted. But your soul, he whispered, it's not just a light switch I flick off. It's layers. Years. Every crack in your sanity, every regret, every lie you've told, it's all unfolding now, isn't it? My knees felt weak. I backed into the wall. I want out, I said. I know, he said. There has to be a way. There is, he said. But it's a path I designed. And it ends with me. He reached into his jacket and pulled out something small and black. A folded piece of paper. He dropped it on the table. A riddle, he said, smiling. Solve it, and I'll give you a hint. Just one. I'm a fair player. I stared at it, not moving. Why? I asked finally. Why play games? Why not just take what you came for? His smile faded for the first time. Because Joan, he said softly, almost sadly, it's not about taking. It's about watching you give in. Watching you peel your own skin off, thought by thought. Then the lights flickered. I blinked, and he was gone. Only the paper remained on the table. I walked over, my legs trembling. I opened it with shaking hands. It read, I walk without legs. I speak without voice. I trap without walls. What am I? I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared, but because deep down I already knew the answer. And I was terrified it would lead me exactly where he wanted me to go. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw David's face. Twisted. Blue. Still. The elevator had crushed him between the second and third floors. The cop said it was a freak mechanical fault, but I knew better. His last message kept blinking on my phone like a curse. Don't trust the priest. And that's exactly who I was on my way to meet. It took me 2 hours to find the place. Father Corbin lived outside the city, near a broken road that twisted through forgotten woods. His house sat behind a rusted iron gate, half swallowed by thorny vines and silence. The building looked more like a mausoleum than a home. Gray stone, narrow windows, a crumbling statue of the Virgin Mary leaning sideways by the porch. I stood there a while, heart pounding. Everything in me screamed to turn back. But then I remembered Lily's laugh. The way she used to fall asleep on the couch watching dumb horror movies. So I knocked. The door opened slowly, as if it had been waiting. The man who stood behind it wasn't what I expected. He was old, maybe in his 70s, with wild white hair and eyes so dark they looked bottomless. He wore no collar. Just a gray sweater with cigarette burns and a cross hanging low on his chest. You're late, he said without greeting. Then he turned and walked inside. The inside smelled of wax, books, and something faintly metallic. The shelves were packed with ancient tomes, some in Latin, others in languages I couldn't begin to understand. Candles flickered on every surface, even though it was barely past noon. I followed him down a narrow hall into a room filled with drawings. Symbols. Sketches of monstrous things with too many limbs and faces turned inside out. On one table lay a circle etched into wood, blackened around the edges. He pointed to a chair. I sat. You've made a deal, he said simply, not asking. Stating. Like he already knew. With something that calls itself Pepe, I answered. My voice came out flat. Tired. He closed his eyes for a moment. Of course it's him. I've seen his handiwork before. He doesn't just take souls. He breaks people first. I leaned forward. Then tell me how to stop it. Corbin looked at me like a doctor about to give a terminal diagnosis. There is no stopping it. Only redirecting it. I stared at him. I don't understand. He walked over to one of the shelves, pulled out a leather-bound book, and dropped it in front of me. Dust billowed into the air. Demons like Pepe don't lie, he said. They don't need to. They deal in truth twisted just enough to destroy you. I opened the book. My hands trembled. Inside were drawings of Pepe, centuries old. Always wearing a different face, but always the same smile. You offered your soul, Corbin continued. That gives him rights. Contractual rights. Binding ones. You can't just break a pact like that. If you try, it doesn't just kill you. It warps you. So what then? I snapped. Do I just hand myself over like a gift-wrapped corpse? He lit a cigarette with a shaky hand. No, but you need to understand something. He leaned close, the smoke curling between us. Demons don't want souls because they need them. They want them because they crave the devastation it brings to the living. The slow burn. The torment. I looked down at the book. There was a page torn out near the back. Scribbled across the corner was a note in red ink. Only those who twist the rules may survive them. I looked back up. So there's a loophole? Corbin sighed. Maybe. But loopholes in hell always have a cost. I left with the book tucked under my coat. Rain had started falling. cold and mean. By the time I got to my car, I was soaked through. As I turned the key in the ignition, I saw something in the rearview mirror. A man standing at the edge of the woods. I knew that silhouette, that sharp jawline, that perfect black coat. Pepe. He didn't wave, didn't smile. He just watched me, like a debt collector marking the days. That night, I locked every window, every door. I put salt at the sills and drew crosses in chalk across the mirrors. But I knew it wouldn't be enough. Pepe wasn't just coming for me. He was already inside. And worse, I was starting to hear his voice when no one else was speaking. I barely slept. The nights were no longer mine. They belonged to whispers, to shadowy hands reaching from corners, to that heavy silence just before something terrible breathes behind you. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lily's face, but twisted, as if someone else was wearing it. Her smile stretched too wide. Her eyes were hollow. Pepe hadn't shown himself in over a week. I thought maybe he was watching from somewhere I couldn't see. Or maybe worse, inside someone I knew. I couldn't trust anything anymore, not even my own thoughts. That morning, I made black coffee and poured it into the sink. My hands were shaking too much to hold the cup. There was something growing under my skin. Guilt, fear, or maybe the pact itself. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. I knew I was running out of time. That's when I remembered the old leather folder from the dusty archives beneath the Boston courthouse. A week ago, while filing a probate case, I had stumbled upon a misfiled box labeled Unresolved Incidents, 19th Century. It smelled like mold and forgotten secrets. I dug it out from under my bed, where I'd thrown it in panic after seeing Pepe's name in it. I hadn't dared to read the whole thing. Until now. I opened it carefully. Inside was a brittle collection of police reports, witness statements, and a burnt photograph of a man with coal black eyes and an unsettling smile. The paper had been scratched in the corner. Someone had written "PP" in shaky letters. The headline read, 1876, 17 deaths in Ashfield. One man blamed. No body found. The story was simple on the surface. In a small town in rural Massachusetts, people had started dying under strange circumstances. One by hanging, another drowned in their own well, another frozen solid in her bedroom. No pattern, no evidence. Only one thing connected them all. Each had met with a traveling philosopher who offered help, or fortune, or healing. I didn't need to read between the lines. I knew. It was him. Pepe. One report chilled me more than the others. A statement from a woman named Agatha Burns. He gave me a silver coin and said my husband would walk again. He did, but only backward. Couldn't speak, couldn't sleep. Walked in circles until he dropped dead. When I begged for help, that man just laughed. Said, "You didn't read the fine print." I slammed the file shut. Pepe had been playing this game for centuries. Wearing different names, different faces, but the same rules, the same cruel smiles. I felt the sigil on my chest burn, like it knew I was getting closer. Later that night, I met with Father Corbin again. We sat in the back room of an old, crumbling bookstore near Tremont Street. The lights flickered overhead like they were unsure if they should stay on. He looked at the photo of Pepe and nodded slowly. "He doesn't kill people," Corbin said, voice low. "He lets them kill themselves with their choices. That's the beauty of his trap. He offers you the thing you want most, and all you have to do is look the other way when the cost comes due." I asked him the question that had been eating me alive. "Has anyone ever escaped?" Corbin hesitated. "Only one," he said. "A woman in Spain, early 1600s. She offered something Pepe couldn't take." "What?" "A replacement soul. But she didn't trick him. She convinced someone else to willingly take her place." My stomach turned. I didn't want anyone else to die for me. But a part of me, some cold part one didn't want to admit existed, began to wonder who I knew that was desperate enough, who was lost enough. I left the bookstore with more weight on my back than when I entered. My breath fogged in the air, even though it wasn't cold. I felt him. Pepe. Watching. That night, Lily knocked on my bedroom door. She looked tired, pale, her eyes unfocused. "I had a dream," she whispered. "You were burning. But you were smiling." I tried to speak, but my throat locked. Then she turned and walked away, still asleep. Or pretending. I stared at the hallway long after she was gone. And for the first time, I asked myself a question I wasn't ready for. What if Pepe doesn't want to take me? What if he wants to become me? And I had just started reading the rules of a game I was already losing. It started as a dull itch near my collarbone. I thought it was just a mosquito bite or maybe stress. I hadn't been sleeping much, hard to rest when you know a demon is counting down the days to your soul. But when I pulled back my shirt to check in the bathroom mirror, I froze. The third mark had appeared. A black, crescent-shaped symbol, almost like a claw scraping across my skin, had etched itself just below my neck. The first mark was on my wrist, the second over my ribs. This one was new, fresh. It pulsed faintly like it was alive, like it was counting my heartbeats. 3 marks. The contract was nearly complete. I leaned against the sink, my hands shaking. The bathroom light flickered overhead. I had 6 days left, maybe less. I splashed cold water on my face, but nothing could wash away the weight crawling across my chest. As I stared at my reflection, something shifted in the mirror. It smiled. I didn't. I staggered back, nearly knocking over the towel rack. My reflection returned to normal, my pale face, my wide, tired eyes, but I knew what I saw. Pepe was getting bolder. The wall between us was thinning. That night, I dreamed of fire. Not flames, exactly, but heat. Cracking wood. Screams in the distance. I stood at the edge of a pit filled with hands reaching upward, each one clawing, grasping, pulling at the edges of the dark. And in the center stood Pepe, calm, grinning, his suit crisp as always. He held out his hand. "You're almost ready," he whispered. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, the air in my bedroom thick like smoke. My phone buzzed beside me. It was a text from Lily. "Can you come over? Something's wrong." I didn't wait. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed the warding charm from Father Corbin, a circle of blackened beads and a silver nail, and rushed out the door. Lily lived in the South End, not far from the hospital where she'd spent most of last year. I drove with shaking hands, running every red light. When I got to her apartment, the hallway was silent. No dogs barking. No TVs. Just a low hum, like the building itself was holding its breath. Her door was unlocked. I stepped inside. The air was cold, unnaturally so, and the lights were dim like someone had turned the brightness down on reality. "Lily?" I called. No answer. Then I saw them. The drawings. Hundreds of them. Everywhere. Pages torn from notebooks, printer paper, even napkins. They covered the floor, taped to the walls, stacked in piles. Each one had the same thing, the demon's sigil. That looping, twisted spiral I had once seen in the old grimoire. And in the center of the living room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, was Lily. She didn't look up. Her fingers were stained with ink, her nails chewed to the skin. She kept tracing the same spiral again and again on the hardwood floor. Her eyes were wide, empty. "Lily!" I dropped to my knees beside her. She turned to me finally, her lips moving in a whisper. "He's already here, Joe." My stomach dropped. "He talks to me when I sleep. Tells me secrets. About you. About the deal. He says you're trying to run." I grabbed her hands. They were freezing. "Lily, listen to me. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to find a way to break the contract. I just need time." She stared at me, head tilted. Then she smiled, but it wasn't hers. It was wide, toothy wrong. "He says if you die before the 6th day, he takes me instead." My blood turned to ice. I stood up, backing away, heart pounding. Pepe wasn't just waiting anymore. He was twisting the rules. Forcing my hand. Either I paid my debt or Lily would. I needed answers. Real ones. No more guessing. No more hiding in dusty books and forgotten corners of libraries. If I wanted to survive and save Lily, I'd have to go to the place where the contract was sealed. Back to the burned church. Back to where the nightmare began. Because now the clock wasn't just ticking. It was screaming. I stood at the edge of the ruins as the cold wind bit into my skin. The old church was barely recognizable now. Just piles of rotting wood, moss-covered stone, and broken beams pointing at the sky like crooked fingers. Moonlight fell through the clouds in slivers, barely lighting the cracked earth beneath my boots. It was 3:27 a.m. I had 6 minutes. My hands shook as I pulled the items from my satchel, each one wrapped in black cloth like fragile glass. I laid them out in a rough circle on the dirt, the blood of the wronged, ash from the burned, and a small vial of Lily's tears. Getting each piece had nearly killed me. I pulled the grimoire from inside my coat, half-burned, pages stuck together with age and something worse. My breath clouded the air as I opened to the final chapter, reversal binding for demonic contracts. The instructions were in Latin, scratched out with symbols I barely understood. But I'd memorized every line. I didn't have a choice. The sigil had to be drawn with ash and sealed with blood. I kneeled, trying not to choke on the sharp scent of decay. I dipped my fingers into the ash, then carefully traced the lines in the dirt. A ring. 2 crosses. A twisted shape like an eye that cried backward. Time was slipping away. 3:31. I opened the vial of Lily's tears. They shimmered like silver as I dripped them onto the center of the circle. Then came the hardest part, the chant. I began slowly, whispering the words I didn't understand, feeling the air shift around me. The trees went quiet. No wind. No sound. Even the night seemed to stop breathing. As I repeated the last line, the sigil sparked, just a flicker of light, like a match struck in darkness. Then came the laughter. It started soft, like someone chuckling behind a door, but it grew louder, deeper, until it echoed across the ruins. I froze, my heart pounding against my ribs. He stepped into view. Pepe. He wore the same gray suit, clean and pressed, not a speck of dirt on him. His eyes gleamed like ink under moonlight. That familiar grin stretched across his face. "Joan," he said, "you really went and found it. The forbidden little footnote." "I'm flattered." I didn't answer. I stood up, fists clenched, the blood from my earlier cut still fresh on my palm. He walked slowly, hands in his pockets, circling the edge of the ritual like a lion eyeing a bleeding gazelle. "You know," he continued, "this ritual, this so-called escape route, was written by a man who died screaming. You might want to ask yourself why." "I'm not here for your riddles," I snapped. "This ends now." Pepe tilted his head. "No, it doesn't end. It just shifts." He stepped forward, but the circle flared, a pulse of light forcing him back. His smile twitched. "All right, boundaries." I kept chanting. The final verses were burning my throat, like the words were made of fire. My skin crawled, sweat dripping down my neck despite the cold. Then the sigil turned black, pure black. It sucked in the light around it. The wind returned, violent and wild, tearing at my coat and hair. My vision blurred. I could feel something rising from the ground, not just beneath me but inside me. Pepe's eyes widened. He looked impressed. "You're not reversing the deal, Joan," he whispered. "You're becoming the deal." "What?" But it was too late. A sound ripped through the air, like bones snapping underwater. My knees buckled. I screamed as pain exploded in my chest, my back arching, my mouth wide but voiceless. Images flooded my mind, people crying, begging, signing contracts with blood. Faces I didn't know. Places I'd never seen. Desires and deaths. Wishes and war. I was seeing through his eyes. Then everything stopped. Silence. Darkness. I opened my eyes. I was lying inside the sigil. The wind was gone. The world was still. Pepe stood at the edge, quiet for once. His grin had faded. He crouched, watching me. "You took the whole thing, Joan. My contract. My role. My burden." I tried to move. My hands were trembling, but the sigil was gone. Only scorched dirt remained. Pepe stood. "You win." "Kind of." Then, he vanished, into smoke, into the wind, into whatever place demons go when they're unbound. I sat up slowly, the cold earth digging into my spine. My reflection appeared in a broken mirror nearby. My eyes were black. Not fully, but enough to know something had changed. The weight in my chest wasn't fear anymore. It was knowledge. Rules. Names. Wishes waiting to be whispered. And just like that, I realized. I hadn't escaped the demon. I had become him. I stood in the center of the ruined church, the floor beneath me covered in cracked stone and ash. My hands trembled as I held the ritual bowl. The black candlelight flickered against the walls, dancing like it knew something I didn't. It was 3:33 a.m. The reversal ritual was nearly complete. Everything I had gathered, David's blood from the broken charm he left behind, ash from this very church where Pepe was once summoned, and Lily's tears collected while she slept, was now mixing in the bowl. I could feel the air tighten around me, like invisible hands pressing in from all sides. I drew the final sigil on the floor with trembling fingers, whispering the words Corbin had taught me. My voice cracked. "By will, by blood, by fire and bind, let the soul once stolen be now unlined." The temperature dropped. A sharp gust of wind blew through the hollow walls, even though the windows were all gone. My candle went out. I was left in near darkness, only the moonlight spilling in through the broken ceiling. I clutched the bowl tighter, heart pounding in my throat. And then he appeared. Pepe stepped out from the shadows like he'd always been there, wearing a charcoal suit so dark it absorbed the light. His skin was pale, stretched too tight over his perfect face. No blemish, no wrinkle. Not even a pore. Just smooth, cold skin and eyes like boiling ink. He clapped slowly. "Well done, Joan. he said, voice soft and amused. I didn't think you had it in you. I backed away. It's over. I broke the pact. You can't take me now. Pepe tilted his head, grinning like a snake about to unhinge its jaw. Oh, darling. You really think this was about taking you? I froze. He took a step forward. The sound of his shoes echoed too loudly, like we were standing in a cathedral made of glass. I never wanted your soul, he said, brushing dust from his sleeve. What use is one more burned-out spirit screaming in the dark? No, Joan. I wanted your will. I shook my head. No. You said 6 months. You said you'd come to collect. And I am, he replied, eyes gleaming. But not in the way you imagined. I knew you'd resist. I wanted you to resist. The broken ones are too easy. But you have fire. Guilt. Love. Rage. All the right ingredients. What are you talking about? He walked around me now, slow like a predator circling prey. The ritual you performed, it wasn't a reversal. It was a transference. A crown, passed from one keeper to the next. You didn't undo the pact. You inherited it. No, I whispered. No, Corbin said. Corbin never read the full text. I made sure of that, Pepe said. You didn't break the chain, Joan. You became it. I felt the mark on my chest burn. Hot, like fire under my skin. I dropped the bowl, and it shattered on the stone floor. My knees buckled. What did you do to me? I choked. Pepe leaned close, his breath cold on my face. You're the new vessel, Joan. A broker of souls. A collector. A dealer. Just like me. I screamed. Not in pain. In realization. The signs were always there. My obsession with the texts. The mark that kept darkening. Lily drawing sigils in her sleep. The whispers in my phone. All of it was guiding me here, not to escape the pact, but to complete the transformation. Pepe smiled wider than a man should be able to. Congratulations. You've been promoted. And then he was gone. Just like that. No smoke. No fire. Just absence. Silence. But I wasn't alone. The shadows didn't retreat. They watched. They waited. Something deep inside me twisted. A sensation like threads being pulled through my chest. I stood up slowly. My hands had stopped shaking. My thoughts were no longer frantic. A strange calm washed over me. Cold, steady, unnatural. I looked around the church, and for the first time, it felt like it belonged to me. I walked out into the morning light. The sky was pink. Birds were beginning to sing. And deep inside me something smiled. I didn't know if I could undo this. But I knew the rules now. And maybe, just maybe, it was my turn to write the contract. The candle flickered once. Just once. I noticed that now. Every flicker, every silence, every shift in the air. The room I sat in wasn't cold, but it felt like winter clung to the edges. Stone walls surrounded me, carved smooth from time and ritual. The desk in front of me was older than anything I'd owned, its surface scratched by desperate hands and names I didn't want to read. And there I was, sitting, waiting. I had done it. I'd saved Lily. She was alive, breathing, laughing again. But in doing that, I'd let something ancient slip inside me. Pepe didn't vanish. He just moved in deeper. He talks to me sometimes. Not with words, but through thoughts that aren't mine, through shadows that lean too far, through the way my smile curves even when I don't feel it. I'm still Joan. But I'm also the gatekeeper now. The next in line. The one who writes the names. A knock echoed through the door. Solid wood. 3 slow taps. They didn't surprise me. They never do. I stood up. My body felt light, but my soul was heavy. The door creaked open, revealing a man in his 30s. Nervous eyes. Chewed fingernails. A folder tucked under one arm, like it held his last hope. He stepped inside, eyes darting around the room. They told me, his voice trembled. They told me you can help people, that you save lives for a price. I didn't answer right away. I let silence stretch thin like thread ready to snap. Then I gestured toward the chair across from me. He sat, barely holding himself together. What do you want? I asked. He fumbled with the folder, pulling out a photo. A little girl. Maybe 7. Bald head, big eyes, hospital wristband. The kind of picture that breaks hearts, if your heart is still yours. She's all I have, he said. The doctors say there's no chance. But if you can do something, anything, I'll give whatever it takes. I looked at the picture, then back at him. He didn't flinch under my stare, which meant either he was brave or already hollowed out. You know how this works? I asked quietly. He nodded. I give something. You give her life. I reached for my ledger. The leather cover pulsed once under my hand. It was alive in its own way. I flipped it open and let the ink form his name before he said it. It always does. The pen scratched softly as I wrote. You don't need to say what you'll give, I said. You only need to say one word. He hesitated, looked at the photo, then at me, then back again. Deal, he whispered. The candle flickered again. This time I smiled. Because the pact was made. The girl would live. And the man, well, I'd see him again. Soon.